lesson 4, the final lesson in Google scripting and how to do things. So I'm going to stop presenting that notification, say hello everyone, and bring you back to our good old friend, the menu. Share that screen. And there we go. All right. As always, I'm going to need to zoom in for you to be able to see that a little bit better. And if at any time you have any questions or comments, please either unmute yourself to speak because I won't hear you otherwise, or use the chat box to send a text message and then we can know what's going on. As always, I'll be sending you some text links through the chat box so that you have references later in the video and the lesson plan on where to go to get this information. So, pull that up. And so our menu, if you recall, has all the items. From the menu in lesson 1, we created the form from that. And that form has, oops, that's pretty zoomed in, isn't it? All right, that form has different items and they can choose however many they want of each one and go through and do those things. Dan mentioned that some of them are coming up blank, and I think that's actually because I was mucking around with the form earlier, so just ignore that. What we wanted to do today is we send out a survey for people to decide what they wanted to learn this week. And the options that came back were 2 people were interested in learning how to use Google Calendar through script and create events using information. 2 people were interested in how to generate reports from data sets using Google Script. And 4 people were interested in generating documents using script. Now, generating documents from using Google Script is very familiar to anyone who has been around the Office, the Microsoft Office world for years. There's a process known as mail merge. A mail merge is a process where you take data from a spreadsheet and you put it into your letter. So your letter to your customers might include their customized first name and the order date and all those things. Now, mail merge is great if you're going to do a bunch of documents all at once. You're going to send out the Christmas letter. You're going to send out the annual catalog with their name printed on it. Those mail merges are great for that. But because they require manual intervention, meaning you have to actually sit down at a computer and make it happen, there's a huge advantage to using Google Script. Google Script can actually take data as it occurs, for example, someone placing an order using our menu, and immediately generate a document based on that submission. So, when we go in there, we have seen that there's a response. Dan Upton has responded. He says his name is Elvis, and he added a phone number. And then he goes into his actual order. Now, one of the important things that you don't see is that in the lesson, or in the menu form, I added 2 questions. I added, what is your name, and what is your phone? And I made those required. Now, required means that whoever's filling out this form cannot submit it without giving us their name and their phone number. Now, Dan made up those information, and that's just fine for today's lesson. So, if you remember from the form script, it said we're going to get the form, we're going to get the responses from the form, and we're going to get the most recent response from the form. And we're going to get the email for who submitted it, and we're going to get the items and their responses. Well, we just added 2 items in there. And so where our loop used to start with item 0, we're going to change that to 2. The reason we're going to change that to 2 is because it says that the food and the amount of food are always item and item number, get the item as a list item, and get the title. Well, our question, your phone number, and your name are not list item questions. They're actually text item questions. And so that would create an error if we read index 0 question and index 1 question. So the way to get around that is when we're building our order list that we did last week, we're going to skip index numbers 0 and 1 by changing that variable to start at 2. So for C equaling 2, each of those items up to the length get 1 added to it. So items index number and get the item as list item will still work, but it will skip the name and it will skip the phone number. Well, if we know that we're skipping the name and the phone number, we need to actually grab those. So we're going to add in really quick a couple of variables. We're going to add in first the customer name. And I'll put that in there. And we grab item 0, index 0, which is the very first item of your name. Notice it's not email address because email address is a separately stored information piece, and it doesn't get counted in the length, and it doesn't get counted as the items. It comes in as its own get respondent email item. It's a separately stored data point. So index 0 is customer name, that first question that we put in. We know that it will exist because we made that a required field. So the next one we want is their phone number. And if customer is item 0, then phone number is obviously item 1. So we create a variable and we know that it is item index 1. We're just going to grab the response. So now what we've done is we've created a way to calculate who it is, the customer, and the phone number. There's a couple of more things we're going to need if we're going to create a document to help people and make an invoice. So one of the common things in an invoice system is what order number it is. Well, in our world, we really think about response numbers because that's how we have it set up, right? It's the number of responses is how many people have placed an order. And the first time you place an order, you always want to have something how to say it, a little bit more marketable. You don't want somebody to feel like they are order number 2 of your restaurant or order number 4. You want them to think they're order number 204. And so what we can do is actually create a variable, and we're going to call it response number. And response number is going to be 230 plus the response length. And what that means is that if there's only one response, and there is only one response, it will generate 2301. If we have 100 responses, it'll create 230100, and it'll look like we're a very busy organization that does lots of things. That's just part of the marketing nonsense that you have to think about when you're putting together systems. Now, we already know the timestamp of when the order was placed, because that comes out of the get timestamp value. What we want to think about, though, is if you recall our email that we sent out and that we sent to Dan when he placed that order says your order will be ready in 20 minutes. Well, that's a very precise time point. And we want to have some way to tell our business that the order time is 20 minutes from when they placed it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create one last variable, and we're going to make it just be another date object. And so what it's going to be is order time, and we create a new date object based on timestamp. Now, timestamp comes from the form response, and so we know that we now have a separate date of order time. Now, date objects are special in JavaScript. We talked about this last week about how to format a date. And even though the date contains not only the year, month, day, but the hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, so it has a lot of information. You don't have to display that all. You can display it how you want. So what we really want to do is, how do I turn order time into the timestamp time plus 20 minutes? And the way to do that is you modify your variable. And modifying a variable doesn't mean you're declaring a new variable. You can, but you don't have to necessarily. So I want to take order time and I want to modify it directly. And the way I want to do that is I want to add 20 minutes to whatever it is. So I'm going to add 20 minutes. Now, the most logical thing you could do would be like that, but that actually doesn't work because it doesn't know what to reference. In this mini function here, after set minutes, plus 20 doesn't mean anything. And so what we're going to do is actually refer back to the date that we have stored before, which is in another mini function. We're going to call timestamp. The reason we call timestamp and not order time is because it can't refer to itself to set its own time. So we have to refer to a different date object. And we already have timestamp handy, and we want to get the minutes on timestamp. So getting minutes of timestamp, this becomes its own little mini function. It's whatever time it is now from timestamp. And then we can add 20 minutes to that, or 20 to the number of minutes. By setting the minutes, you're not changing the hours, the days, the year, the month, the seconds, or the milliseconds. All you're changing is the minutes. Now what that does is we now have our variable of order time that is set up as 20 minutes from when the order was placed. So what we could do is in our email to Dan, instead of saying your order will be ready in 20 minutes, we can say your order will be ready at order time. Now we're going to run that, and that will send the email to Dan. And I'm going to pull it up here, because it just sent it to Dan, didn't it, Dan? Once it wakes up. There we are. Okay, this is the order that just went, or email that just went to Dan. It said, thank you for your order. Below is what we're preparing for you. Your total will be $311. Your order will be ready at Monday, May 4, 2020 at 16:04. That's not super helpful because it's not formatted. But if you remember from last week, we can simply format the date to make it pretty. So we're going to format order time. We're going to make it PST again, because that's where we're at, Pacific Standard Time. And this time, instead of month, let's get down here. So instead of month, day, year, what we're going to do is change it to something more simple. Hour, minute, and A. That A indicates AM, PM. And this is again from the documentation we sent last week. So now when we send it, let's also think, instead of sending it to email, we're going to send it to Dan. So we want to change the body to customer. Now when we send it, oops, what did I miss? Line 107. I have an extra something. Oh, I have an extra this in there. Extra semicolon. I apparently accidentally cut off the end of that string. That'll do it. Okay, there we go. So now our email to Dan says, let's zoom in on this. Hopefully that makes it easier to read. Elvis, thank you for your order. Your order will be ready at 4 p.m. That's a whole lot more customer friendly. So we now have our customer name and we have our customer order time ready to use where we need it. We want to create a document out of that. Now, when you're creating documents using Google Script, you need to think in terms of what's called a template. And a template is a document that is ready to have information put in there. Now, I stole one and created it in advance for today because otherwise we would not get it through today. So we have an invoice. This invoice is shared, and I'm going to send you the link through the chat box so that you can make a copy of it for your own self. So our invoice doesn't have to be super fancy, has the name of our company, and then it has ordered, and underneath ordered, it has timestamp. Now, if you'll remember, timestamp is a variable that we already declared. We declared timestamp from the form itself. So we can use timestamp as an easy way to remember where we're going to put that. And what I recommend as best practice is use the exact variable name and, in fact, copy and paste, because you will be very sad when you forget to capitalize or uncapitalize whatever it is. So response number, that is obviously misspelled, matches exactly the response number variable that we created, that is our order number, our pretend order number, 230 plus however many responses there is. Order ready is going to have order time. Now, order time, again, is that 20 minutes from when they ordered it. If this document came to the chef in my pretend restaurant, they would know how long they have until to prepare that food. The customer, same idea. We want it to have the customer's name and we want the customer's phone number on there, because if we're going to place an order, we need to know who ordered it. Now, the actual order, we declare items. Now, items, if you recall, we already have, because we have our final order listed, right? And it was super helpful. Well, if we put items here, it's actually going to grab items, and that's not the right variable that we want. That's every form item. We actually want final order to be listed in that location instead. So instead of items, it needs to be final order. Now, the grand total of the order is grand total. We had that one from before in the email that we sent to our customer. We had grand total to fixed to, if you recall. So we have that one already figured out. Down below, we have the customer name, we have our address for the pretend store, and everything's pretty much simple at that point. It's a fairly easy invoice, and you can make this as complicated as you want, obviously, but this one's going to be fairly simple for us. Now, in order for us to access the document, we need to grab the ID. And just like we've done before with the form, you go to the URL at the top of the screen and you grab that crazy long string of digits that is the unique ID for the document, file, form, sheet, whatever it is. That's what you want. So you're going to copy that. And then we're going to go back to our script, and we need to actually pull up that order first. So the first thing we want to do is grab that document, and we want to get, we can do that using a new Google script, or new to you anyway, that we haven't used yet, called Drive app. And Drive app allows us to do lots of things with files. It doesn't change what's in the file. It just grabs the file. It makes copies of the files. It creates files. It renames files. And so to access Drive app, simply declare Drive app. And we want to get the file by ID. Click on that. Now we know that we have it in our clipboard, so we can just paste in our ID that we grabbed from the document. And we have to put it in quotes so that it knows it's a string. Now, if I change this document it's going to change this document. And then every time from then on, it won't say final order. It'll say whatever it's been changed to. So we need to actually make a copy of it, not use the original. So to do that, we're going to make a copy. Now, it suggests we put in a name in there, and I would suggest that maybe since we now have the customer's name and phone number, let's use that instead. So let's put in customer, and we add our blank space between words, and then phone number, and then order. And that seems simple enough. Now at the end of that, we need to get the ID of the new file. We have the ID of the original template, but we need to get the ID of the new one. And so to get that, we go back and we ask it to get the ID of the new file. So the reason I named the variable invoice copy ID is because I knew that I was good at the end of doing that process. All I really wanted was the ID of the new file. So we're calling drive app. We're getting the file by that ID, which is the template we've been referring to. We're going to make, oops, don't want to do that. We're going to make a copy of it, and we're going to name the new file customer name plus space plus phone number plus order. And then we're going to get the ID. Now, once we have that ID, we need to open up that copy of the invoice. And so we're going to call the new one the new invoice. And to do so, we're going to use document app, which is yet another Google system that you have not yet played with, but now you are. And we're going to open by ID. Now we know the ID because we just created it and we remembered it by declaring the variable. So we can put that in as our variable to open the ID. If anyone has any questions up to this point, go ahead and send them in the chat window or unmute yourself. So far, so good? Excellent. Okay. We now have the document as the variable invoice. So we know we can do things to it. Now this goes back to, if you want to learn how to do these things, go to help, go to documentation, and it will open up your reference guide. Under G Suite services, not only does it have Drive app, which we just used, it also has Document app. Document app gives us everything, but specifically, it will allow us to get the body of a document. Now, the body is everything in the document. It's the full document contents. So we want to get that. And the way to do that is we're going to say, let's just call it doc for short. And we need to get invoice, and we want the body. So we can get body of doc, or of the invoice. So now that we have that, think of it as just the contents on your page. It has all of the text, but it ignores all the formatting, all of that. Melissa has a question. When you grab the ID of the form, will it generate a new ID every time that the document is used? So when we grab the invoice copy ID right here, what we're doing, Melissa, we're grabbing the original, which is why it's hard-coded, meaning I typed it in there, and we're going to make a copy of that. So every time you run the script, it's going to get the original template and then make a copy of that template to get the new ID. So you will have a brand new ID for every single invoice that you create. Yes. Hopefully that answers your question. And you say a form, but I think you mean an invoice in this case. But it would be the same with a form. If you created a form, if you got a form by ID and made a copy of it, it would create a new form ID. If you grabbed a sheet by this ID and created a copy, it would be a new sheet and a new ID. So going back, we've declared the invoice by opening the new ID that we just generated, and then we're getting the body of the document. Now, we can do a whole bunch of stuff now to that body of the document. And if you recall, the way to find out what you can do is type your variable and then hit the period. And it brings up all these things. We can append a list item. We can append an image if we want. We can do all these things. We can edit as text. We can do great, amazing things. But the one we actually want is to replace text. Now, when you put it in there, it has these helper things in there. So it tells us what we're looking for. And it says, replace text, search pattern, and replacement. Well, when we go back to our invoice, let's do the first one, which happens to be order time. What we actually want is everything, including those brackets, because that's all the text, and it doesn't appear anywhere else in the document. It only appears where we want the order time to appear. So we can go in and we can search using quotes for order time in brackets. And we're going to replace it with order time, but we have to format the order time as using utilities. So we're going to do a mini function, and we're going to do just like we did in the email down below where we used utilities format date. We're just going to copy that and paste it into there. You see down in the email section, so that it formats the date as hour, minute, A, and you can even get rid of the first hour marker if you want. It doesn't matter. So this process is going to be repeated over and over for each item that we have. So the next one, for example, is going to be the final order. And so to do that one, it's going to be doc, replace text, and we're going to look for final order. Make sure I copy and paste that because I didn't actually copy and paste it. Copy and paste, remember, don't just type. Ignore what I'm doing. Bad habits. And then we're going to fill it with the variable final order. And we're going to do that over and over, and I'm just going to copy and paste to save us some time. But you get the idea that you're going to grab what is the body of the document and find and replace the text. Every time it says what customer in brackets, we'll replace with our information customer. Everywhere where it says grand total, we're going to replace with the grand total. Everywhere for phone, we're going to replace with phone. Everywhere there's a timestamp, we're going to replace it with a formatted timestamp. And everywhere there's a response number, we'll replace it with our new fictitious order number. Now, what have I missed? Anything? Oh, yes. We actually need to save this somehow. So we have replaced all the text, but we didn't bother to save the document. So this is very important when you play with Document app. If you don't save and close the document, it will not work the way you expect it to. So we want to call back invoice, the document we created, the copy, and then save and close. When it said void in there, that means that there are no other options on that. It simply saves and closes the document. So what we have now is we have created a copy of the document using those variables. We're going to go ahead and run it. And Dan, I apologize for you getting so many copies of this email now, but I don't, well, let's turn it off for Dan. I'm going to teach you how to block comment things. I've taught you before how you can use the 2 lines to comment out 1 line. A block comment allows you to block out a whole bunch of stuff. And you do that by using the / and star to begin and the star / to end. What that does is everything in between is viewed as a comment. It doesn't actually do anything. So now, by running this, it should not send Dan an email again, but it should get a copy of our template, create a new one, and then go into the body there and replace the text placeholders with what we want, and then save and close it. Let's go ahead and run that. If we've done it right, in my drive, we should now have a copy of the file called Elvis plus phone number plus order. And there we are right there. Let's Elvis 775-576-4422 order. So when we look in on that order, here is our invoice. It has changed the order timestamp to the correct amount. There's where it put in our invoice number. The order will be ready at 4:04 p.m. It's by Elvis, and there's his phone number. Our lovely final order is already formatted because we did that for the email, and that gives us our grand total. You notice, by the way, I had to add the $sign outside of the stamp for grand total. And that's one of those little things that gets you every once in a while if you forget to do. I'm hoping, Dan, that you're sincere in your expression of cool. And thank you. I appreciate that. So we've now generated an invoice on the fly. What I want you to do right now is everybody gets to fill out an order and create a copy. Actually, no, let's not do everybody. Let's say, Melissa, will you please fill this out very quickly, creating an order? Whatever you would like that to be, it doesn't matter. We're going to watch you. As Dan said, I messed up the first number of items, so make sure you're choosing items that have an option of numbers. And we should see her response come in on the response number as soon as she does so.
Did you just send it to me?
I put it in the chat box.
Sorry.
So if you open the chat box on Hangouts, it's a link right there. Not sure if I can even send you an individual chat. Now, while she's doing that, we're going to uncomment out our email and save that, because if you recall, we have the trigger set to automatically run when someone submits the form. So as soon as she submits her order and we see the response there, we should be able to go to My Drive and see a new file that is the new response. And Melissa, if you need me to send you that link otherwise, just let me know.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Two responses right there. Melissa has just submitted her order, and so Melissa's in there as a name. Now, when we go in, we should see that it's done a couple of things. We should see that it has run and created a drive file and sent the email to her. So let's go in. Let's refresh Drive to make sure that I actually can see all the files. And there it is. Okay, so Melissa's order should be ready at 4:54 p.m., 20 minutes from now. It should be her information. I hope that's not your real number.
Yep.
Oh, really?
What?
Now I gotta edit the video.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's fine. So it has her order, it has the grand total, and it has her name. It's ready to go. Okay. So what we've done is we've created a Google Doc. Now, that Google Doc is great because, as you know, you can do all sorts of things with it. You can share it, you can send it, you can download it, and all those great things. But wouldn't it be nice if it did that automatically? So we go back into our script. And what we want to do is think about how can we get that document as a PDF. And so in Google script and in JavaScript in general, there is a concept called a blob, B-L-O-B. And so what we want to do is we want to create a blob. So we're just going to name it blob. It doesn't have to be named blob. You can name it anything you want, but we're going to create a blob. We want to get that same file that we had before. So we want to get the file, and we already have the ID from before. So we want to get that file. And then what we want to do is hitting the period so we can pull up. We want to get it as something. And in this case, what we want to do is get it as a PDF. And so this is in the reference as well. What you want to do is instead of content type, you want to say, I want to get it as an application PDF. Now, that's super helpful because it now exists as a PDF in memory of Google. And I want to store the PDF order, for the accountants or for whatever we need. So we're going to name a PDF variable. We're going to call drive app again. And this time we're going to create a file. And it says right in there, create file blob source blob. So we're going to leave that, and conveniently, because I named the variable blob, it's already right there. If I had named the variable Rambo, I would have to name the blob Rambo. If I could type. There you go. In any event, as long as it's calling that variable, you're good. So now what we've done is it's going to create a PDF in my drive of that file. Plus, I'm not going to send you an email again, but I am going to run the script again. So we run the script. And now when we go to Drive, I have a PDF of the order. So now I have a PDF file of that invoice generated automatically, and I didn't have to do anything. Now that's all great and fine and dandy, but wouldn't it be nice if Melissa got that PDF in her email? And more importantly, wouldn't it be nice if the kitchen of my fancy restaurant got the PDF of that order automatically on their printer so they can make Melissa's order? So we need to think about, okay, we know we have our PDF now. We need to somehow attach it to the email. So we're going to do some little research. We're going to go into our reference. And instead of document app, we're going to go down to mail app. And you should all remember mail app because we played with it last week. So the mail app has one that says send email, recipient, subject, body, and options. And it's the options that we didn't do anything with last week, but we're gonna this week. When you click on there, it gives you a beautiful example. It says mail app, send email. Let me zoom in on that because that might be tiny. Send it to Mike. Attachment example, 2 files are attached, the name, automatic emailer script, and the attachments. Now this one has 2 attachments, we only need 1. So what we want to do, we're just going to steal his options there. We're just going to grab through there, copy it, and at the end of our let's give a line right there so we can read it. At the end of our mail app, send email, we have our green indicators of where it ends. We're going to add one more variable. So remember, we separate that by commas. We're going to add a comma, and then we're going to paste what we just stole from the example itself. If we did it right, we should still have a green highlighted beginning and a green highlighted end, which we do. In there, we have these brackets, and this is where we have the options in an email. Now, you can use the options to do inline images. You can do it to give a name to the email. You can do all sorts of stuff. I don't need to worry about the name, so we're just going to delete that out. What we care about is the attachment. Now, if you remember from the sample, it says there's 2 files. Well, I only want 1 file. I've got my PDF. I don't have a blob. I don't want to do the blob there. So what we want to do is get rid of blob. We already dealt with the blob. This file get as mime type PDF, we already have the file because we created it right there. So we're going to call it, and actually we can even call this Rambo because Rambo was the original file and it was as a PDF. So we can just get the Rambo as a PDF. Now, Melissa, I'm going to send this to you because we're going to run it right now. And what you should now have is another email here in a moment, once it's done running. And there's a second email, and it now has her order addressed to Melissa. Everything's in there. Order will be ready at 4:54, and attached to her email is her PDF order. Now, the huge advantage of that is once this is triggered and set up automatically, I don't have to do anything to create these documents or have them go places and do whatever they need to do for your business. You don't have to think about it. It just happens in the background automatically, consistently. Once you have scripted it correctly, it'll do anything you want. You can use this to generate reports. You can use this to generate invoices. You can use this to generate job applications. You can use this to generate almost any business document you can think of. Court documents are created this way sometimes. I've helped with those before. So we have this document. We sent it to Melissa, but we didn't send it to the kitchen. So here in the recipient portion of send email, because if you remember, the very beginning part is recipient, we're going to add a second email. And in emails, when you have multiple addresses, you have to separate them by a comma again. And we're going to send it to kitchen@familysupport.org. So it'll go to Melissa plus kitchen. Now, kitchen I don't think is a real email address, so I'm going to put mine. Actually, we'll send it to the copier. Let's pretend that the copier is set to print automatically any emails it receives, which is a fairly common real copier process. So we're going to send a copy of the email to the copier, and it's going to print it out for the kitchen ready to print. And all I had to do with that is added to it the comma and the other email addresses that it has to go to every single time. Now, if you didn't want to do it that way, you could add BCC information in the options, and it would blind copy the copier so that no one else would see it. I'm not going to get into that today, but there's a lot of options available. We just don't have time to do it. What we do need to do is add an event to the cook so that they know that by the order time, which is the 20 minutes out, they have to have Melissa's order ready. That one's really, really easy to do. So we're going to create a new variable. We're going to call it the event. And we're going to call yet another Google service we have not played with yet called Calendar App. It's amazing how inventive they are with their names, isn't it? Hitting the period, and it allows us to start seeing what we can do. And we can want to create an event, amazingly enough. So we're going to click on that, and the title, we want the title to be the same as what the file name title is. So we're just going to grab that mini function of what we named the file, and we're going to slap that in place of the title. The start time is when they place the order, so we already know we have that as a timestamp. The end time is the order time of when we promised it would be done, if I could type. So the order time becomes the end time. Now you'll notice these are not formatted because I actually need the year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and millisecond information on all of those to create. So when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and block out, comment the email. I don't need to send the email to Melissa again. I'm going to run it, and it's going to create a calendar event that is occurring right now. we need to review our permissions because we just added a new service that we have not done before with the calendar. So I'm going to approve that. It allows us to do pretty much everything at this point. It allows us to do all the drive, documents, spreadsheets, calendar, forms, and send email as me. It does pretty much everything. We're going to allow it. It's going to run the function. Okay, so let's take a look at our calendar. So when we get in there and we look at the day and we zoom in, we can see that we now have a new event added to my calendar automatically. Melissa ordered from there to there. Now, it would be nice if we attached the attachment to it as well. And just like everything else, you can go to the calendar app resource and learn how to create a calendar event that has options. So this one, in this case, you can add a location, but when you get into the options, you can add description, location, guests, or invites, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that isn't listed, like attachments and so on, just like emails. So it's not documented very well, but it does exist, and a quick Google search will help you find all of it. Okay, so today we have now learned how to take our order, take a template or create a template using these fields, merge the two to create a new document, and then email the document to the customer as well as to the kitchen so that they can create the order. And then we created an event on the calendar so that Joe Bob in our kitchen is going to see on his screen that he has until 4:54 to create Melissa's order. I'd like to open it up to questions. No one has any questions today? I don't believe that.
If you have a calendar event, like you just created, and you want to attach, say, like something for said person to do within that calendar event, could you do that?
Absolutely. So there's different ways to do that. In our case, we just made a very simple title of the event using the customer data, the phone number, and the word order. But that could be driven off of form data, that could be driven off of spreadsheet data, that could be driven off of hard-coded text, like where I put order in hard-coded text. You could put almost anything in there and it would do so. If you wanted it to have, there's actually some crazy things we could do. So for example, and I'm going to do this rather quickly, so I apologize if you're not able to keep up quite here. We're going to call we're going to call a calendar item. We're just going to name it Cal, C-A-L. And in this case, instead of creating an event, I'm going to get a calendar by name. And the name I'm going to get is email. Now, email, if you remember, is who submitted the form. It was the get respondent email. So I'm going to get Melissa's email right here. Now down here, instead of calling calendar app again, I'm just going to call Melissa's calendar by using that variable. And when I run that, Melissa, you're going to have to verify for everybody that you now will have an event on your calendar called Melissa phone number order. Oops, what did I do?
I don't think you named it the calendar.
You're right. There we are. I'll need to send an email again. Sure, you're tired of getting emails. I grabbed the wrong get calendar. Okay, Melissa, please check your calendar. You should have an event on there that ends in 3 minutes.
Yes.
You do now, correct?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. So by doing that, I grabbed my employee's calendar and added it to them purposefully. Now we could use the email of the customer and they would get a calendar invite sent by Google Calendar. You could also use Joe Bob, our chef. So we could, instead of email, we could put Joe Bob at family support, and it would grab Joe Bob's calendar. Now, Joe Bob doesn't actually exist, so that won't work. But you could still do it that way. And so by grabbing the calendar first, you can create it wherever you need it to be. And you can do all sorts of things at that point, because now we have the event listed. We could even add guests.
Could you also add attachments?
I don't think you can do it straight that way. The way to add attachments is only through the options of the create event call. And so instead of ending an order time, you have to go in where it says options for calendar. Forget where I'm at. So where it has options, and in there, that's where you can add the attachment. To add the attachment in there, you would put a comma, and then the brackets and attachments, much like we did before. In fact, we can probably just copy that bad boy. There we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not going to run that one because I'm not 100% sure. I recommend you Google how to run that add-on for the attachment, because they've changed that in the past year when they updated their scripts. So we can add a guest. We can add the copier, for example, and it will appear on the copier's calendar. We can change the color. We can set the color of the event, the blue, for example. What other questions do we have?
Can you add a form to that calendar event?
You can. So one of the items you can do is in the description, which is the notes section of the event, you can actually add information just like we did in the email. So you could actually add a link as HTML in there. You could add almost anything you can think of in terms of text that you'd like to put in there. So click here and a big icon to click and go to the form that you want them to go to. You can also do that programmatically without doing it through the create event. Some things you have to do through create event, other things you don't. This one, we can add it through the event itself. We can set the description, and this is an order, and then we can say final order. That would put the entire order in their calendar event, which would be good if there was a screen in the kitchen that showed what they needed to be making right now. Okay, if there's not any other questions, I have one 3-minute report answer for those people who requested how to create a report. Are there any other questions before I do that? Okay, so we want to have a report sent of everything that goes on. And it's ideally going to have the totals of everything. So the way to do that is we're going to go back to where we grabbed all of the responses from the form, where it has all of the items. And what we're going to do is we're going to create yet another loop that incorporates a lot of the other stuff. So let's call this one, I don't even know where at, so we'll just call it X. X is less than responses length, X plus plus. And then what we're doing is having it loop through the order as many times as it needs to be. And in there, outside of the loop, we need to create our report variable, and it needs to be an empty array. Down as we go through the totals, we're going to we're going to grab the report, and we're going to push into the report array. We want to have the final order. Oops, I did that too soon in my script. So we want to move it after final order. So what it's doing is it's looping through every single order, and it's grabbing the final order and pushing it into a report. So then we could go in and get our log of the report, and it will have every single order in one single array. Once you have an array that has all of the data in it, or every single order in this case, you can then loop through that array to create any report imaginable. If you want to count the number of times apple slices were ordered, you would be able to go through and query apple slices, and if so, how many, or query how many of each item are counted each time, and all these amazing things. There's ways to pull out massive amounts of useful data, but what you're really doing is simply looping through the form and pushing it into yet a new array. And that new array allows you to do all those things. I'm not going to run it because right now it would also loop through and create a whole bunch of ordered copies. So we're not going to actually do it. Okay, that is it for today. Who has any other questions? No other questions? Okay. It's 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you, Melissa and Dan, for being guinea pigs. And I encourage all of you to watch the recordings later and practice on your own. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you very much.